terrific DEC sponsors for their continued support of our mission. And I also want to thank our friends at Detroit Public TV for live streaming our meeting today. Be sure to get your tickets for our next two upcoming speakers. Next Tuesday, October 20, we'll be hosting Charles Evans, President of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Johnson, Alex Gorski will be with us. And as you know, his company is racing for a COVID vaccine. I do want to offer a very special welcome to 16 high schools who are always near and dear to the DEC, too many to name, and we're happy you've joined us today. Here's the format for today's meeting. I'm going to interview our guest speaker for 20 minutes. And for the final portion, we'll get to questions that you submitted via email. We want you to submit more questions real time via the chat room. And once we say goodbye to our guest, we hope you'll all stay for the DEC's got an incredible history of speakers, as you know, and we love to share it. October 15th is a very popular date in our 86-year history. Our speaker today now joins a distinguished list of 20 other speakers who address the DEC on this date. A few highlights: 1976, then presidential candidate Jimmy Carter addressed the DEC. 1991, Ross Perot on this date. In 2002, Granholm and Posthumous did a gubernatorial debate. And just 2 years ago, Debbie Stabenow and John James were here for their senatorial debate. And today we're pleased to add Sal Khan as our 21st speaker on this day in DEC history. So let's get started. Sal is the founder and CEO of Khan Academy, a nonprofit organization with a mission to provide a free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Sal's been profiled by 60 Minutes, featured on the cover of Forbes, and recognized as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. He holds 3 degrees from MIT and an MBA from Harvard Business School. It's his first visit to the DEC. So Sal, great to see you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Great to be here, Steve.
Let's jump right in and let's get started by asking you about Khan Academy's mission and how this all got started.
Yeah, you know, my original background was in tech and in math, and then I go to business school. I end up as an analyst at a hedge fund in Boston. And it was about a year out of business school. I just gotten married and my family was visiting me from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And just came out of conversation that my cousin Nadia, who was 12 at the time, was having trouble in math. And because of that, she was put into a slower math class. And so, I talked to her and she says she has trouble with unit conversion. I said, I'm convinced you can learn unit conversion. So I say, how about when you go back to New Orleans, I'll tutor you over the phone or over instant message or whatever we early. I got her past her, unit conversion, got her caught up with her class, a little ahead of her class. At that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin and called her school. Said, I really think Nadia Rahman should retake that placement exam. They let her. But long story short, that she went into a kind of an advanced track. I started tutoring her cousins. Word spread in my family that free tutoring was going on. And I started writing software for them so that they can get as much practice and feedback. And that was the first Khan Academy. And then a friend suggested, why don't you make some videos? A horrible idea. YouTube's for cats playing piano, but I gave it a shot anyway. And it's my cousin's family. She told me they like me better on YouTube than in person. But even more relevant is that people around the world started using it. People who are not my cousins. And by 2009, there was about 50 or 100,000 folks using it every day. I was having trouble focusing on my day job, frankly. And that's when I set it up as a not-for-profit with a mission of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And, that next year was hard. I didn't get any funding. We were living off of savings, et cetera. But by 2010, we were able to become a real organization. And, you fast forward to today, we have over 100 million registered users. During COVID, it's about 30 million users a month. To make it personalized, to meet you where you are, and envision a world where no one is kept from their potential as long as they have just some simple device access and internet access.
That's amazing. Sal, talk about Khan Academy usage since the pandemic began. You touched on it in your opening remarks, but really interested to see what's happened since February, March.
Yeah, we first caught wind that we were going to be important in February. Letter from a teacher in South Korea saying that they were using us when their schools were closed nationwide. And I remember thinking, how wild is that? A whole country closing its schools. And then the very next week, out here in California, a local private school had to shut down because of contact tracing. And this was when there was probably, I don't know, maybe 20 confirmed cases in the country. But that was when it first came on our radar that, wow, maybe this happens in the US. And if it does, I think it's going to be us that a lot of people are going to lean on, because people are going to need something that's free, that's accessible, that works for a classroom context and an at-home context. It's comprehensive, has efficacy studies behind it, trusted. And so we started immediately scheduling webinars to help train parents and teachers on how to do this, putting out learning plans. And then that week that we all remember, when the schools started closing down around the country, we saw our traffic, in a normal school day, we were seeing about 30 million learning minutes per day. We saw that grow to about 80, 85, 90 million learning minutes. So about 250 to 300% of normal. Parent and teacher registrations were 10 to 20 times normal. And, we've just been trying to keep up with that and trying to accelerate as many services as we can to keep everyone learning.
It's amazing. Can we talk about the digital divide and distance learning in general? And then also follow up to that, what is, in your opinion, distance learning doing to inequality in this?
I wish I could I tend to run as a very optimistic person, and I am optimistic in the long run. But, I'll be very frank. This is a very bad situation that we've been going in. And obviously, it's because of realities of the virus. Um, but this is a year where it's suboptimal for everyone. But I think, especially probably the bottom quartile, I think is going to fall further behind. There's a lot of talk these days of a K-shaped recovery, and it took me a while to grok what a K-shaped recovery is, but really it's a less than sign. And people are talking in economic terms that some people who work in tech, who can do remote work, they're doing just fine. But obviously, a lot of service workers, a lot of people who might work in travel, or they're hurting very badly, probably worse than they ever have in their life right now. And I think something very similar is happening in education, where you know it's for my family, for a lot of middle class, upper middle class families. Obviously, this isn't optimal, but we have the internet access. The schools are very tech savvy. We all live in the house. We're able to support our kids. We have multiple devices in our house, so our kids have been able to stay engaged. So I think our kids are going to do just fine. And I think there's actually even pockets where people are realizing that they're enjoying the flexibility of it. They're able to cater to their students' needs even more. You're hearing about these pods and all of that. But as you're alluding to, there's a large chunk of the population, in Detroit public schools we work very closely with, 30, 40, 50% of kids don't have adequate internet. And there might be 2, 3, 4 kids at home. They can't just share one device, especially if distance learning is expecting each of them to spend many hours using a device of some kind. So step one is closing the digital divide. We're seeing more energy there than we ever have. So that might be a silver lining. Step two is, even when the digital divide is close to closed, kids need more support at home. And so there, we're seeing good examples. We saw some schools in Maryland where they're distance learning. The teachers are at home, but they're bringing that 5 or 10% of kids who need the supports, who need the free lunch, who need everything, to come to school, and they have some adults who can kind of give them that supportive environment that a lot of parents are able to do for the bulk of students. So it's going to be a tough year. The learning loss, you have learning loss every summer, where not only do you not learn for summer, half the kids might learn just fine, not have any learning loss, while the other half could have fairly dramatic learning loss.
That's incredible. Sal, I'm just kind of laughing here. I don't know if you could tell, but there was a fire alarm going off in our building. So I'm going to hope it's false. I'm going to continue on.
And we don't hear it, but yeah, you say.
Thanks. So we've got a few minutes left before we go to audience questions. And we promised our members we'd get into some virtual learning tips. Many members on the Zoom with K through 12 children are experiencing. What pointers can you give to parents to help them make sure their students get the most out of this virtual learning experience?
Yeah, and I'll answer your question, but I'm really worried now for your
I think we're
safety.
good. It's kind of a frequent occurrence. I think we're
Okay,
okay.
okay. This is nothing is worth. No, no, no. But from a parent point of view, is a lot of parents were worried that not enough was happening for their children, and now in the fall, we're actually seeing the opposite. A lot of parents feeling stressed that too much is happening. And what I've been telling folks, and I tell this to myself, and I tell this to my wife, from the beginning, we remind ourselves that really, if your child is able to continue to progress and not atrophy in math, if math, that's where Khan Academy already has very comprehensive content, very comprehensive practice. If kids are able to spend 20, 30 minutes a day consistently, and for younger kids, it might be 15, 20 minutes a day. For older kids, maybe 2 sessions of 20 minutes a day. They're not only going to keep up, but they're going to continue to actually progress, and in some cases might even accelerate because it'll be more personalized for them. And we have many 20, 30 minutes a day, read a magazine, read a newspaper, talk about it at lunch, talk about it at dinner with your kids, read the same articles with them. It's going to be very compelling for them, and they're going to be maybe more engaged than they might be in a traditional environment. On the writing, ask them to write an opinion piece once a week about something. How should the chores be done in the house? Or 30 minutes a day, just that. And what I just described is about an hour and a half a day. I think your children are going to be just fine. Like there's 3 hours of Zoom, and you're having to help your kids, especially younger kids, submit assignments. Talk to the school about it, because I think right now schools feel pressure to do a lot, and they're redlining at the same time. Parents are feeling pressure to do a lot. Call your school, have a respectful is the key. There's a lot of stress now, and it's very easy. The teachers are doing heroic work right now, but if you tell the teacher, like, look, you're doing an amazing job, but I think there's an opportunity where I want to figure out a way to lighten your load and lighten my load. So I think those types of conversations, very open filter, would be welcomed, and I think everyone's open to having it right now. And what I just talked about, kind of an hour and a half, that's, I think, even doable outside of COVID times. Do it over summer, do it over breaks, and even maybe do it over some school days. And that's the kind of thing that really ensures that your kids are gonna not just not fall behind, but have really strong foundations.
Thanks, Hal. I had to unmute myself there. So we've got a great group of high school students on our Zoom today. How can they maximize this time in their lives?
So if I was a remember this in high school, there's all the stuff that you want to do, and COVID, and usually you're saying, oh, I would love to learn to paint or play the guitar, or talk to my grandparents more, or start an effort to help people, but I don't have this, and I'm on the honor society, and I have to do this and that. COVID has, for better or for worse, it's taken a lot off of our plates. A lot of the stuff that we used to love to do that was taking a lot of our time, we can't do anymore. Extracurriculars like you were before. You're not able to socialize in all the ways that you were before. I encourage, try to do it as much as you can, but it has put constraints. And so view that as kind of a glass half full, is that this could be an opportunity for you to take that time and that focus it on some of these other things that you always say. A crisis, as I think it was Winston Churchill, maybe I'm misquoting him, but never waste a good crisis, which is, during times of crisis, that's also the biggest time for opportunities. I remember when I was in high school or in college or even a young professional, I always had this craving to maybe make a little bit of a dent in the universe, and I didn't know what it was, whether it was I was going to start a business or create. But it always felt like, oh, well, all the problems have been solved, or there's a lot of smart people who've already solved that problem. Why me? But right now during COVID, and it's not just because of COVID, but it's the COVID, it's the economy, where obviously the country is grappling with issues of race. We have the education crisis. There's so many opportunities for young people to step up and do really interesting things to help other folks. I have a separate effort from Khan Academy, which I just the COVID crisis, called schoolhouse.world, which is a place where students who need help, who need tutoring, can participate in live group tutoring sessions for free, done by volunteer vetted tutors. And you as a student are encouraged to be a tutor yourself. There was a student from Ghana, there was a student from Pakistan, a student from England. And so what could be a more fun way to connect? And also, if you tell colleges or employers, yeah, I'm an algebra tutor or I'm a calculus tutor, no one's going to question whether you know that material. That's the best. We don't view that as a credential today, but if you think about it, it is actually the ultimate credential, that you know how to teach a subject. Because not only does it mean you know the material, but it shows that you can communicate, you can empathize. So I would just encourage students. There's just so much you can do, and it's all at your fingertips. At no point in history have young people been this empowered, because what I was doing with Nadia back in 2004, you can do right now, or you can do analogs in other domains.
Thanks. I think I'm unmuted. Last but not least, mad respect for our heroic educators who certainly have their share of virtual learning challenges. And we've got some of those educators on today's Zoom. What do you say to them?
So, the advice I have for educators is the same advice I have for everyone, for parents is, you know, it's stressful. You should recognize that stress. Frankly, your job is stressful even when we're not going through COVID. Anyone who's had to stand in front of a classroom of 30 kids for even an hour knows how hard that can be sometimes. But if you're doing it for multiple hours at end, and then COVID has added, several curveballs all at once. And so, what I remind teachers is, I think everyone understands that this is once again viewed as a glass half full. It's kind of thrown a curveball, but it's also, I think there's more permission than ever to experiment, to try new things, to fail, to question assumptions. I think there's no period in time where your administration or parents are going to be, hopefully they're always understanding, but I think they're the most understanding right now. So it's a great time to try new things. And if you fail, that's okay. Fail forward, learn from it, tell your peers, yeah, I tried that, didn't quite work, I'm gonna do something else. But it's, in some ways it's exciting, because you can rethink, instead of an hour session with 30 kids, maybe you do 10-minute sessions, 10-minute sessions with 5 kids each. Ways to mix up what you do with the classroom, ways to lean more on kind of some asynchronous learning practice, things like Khan Academy. And then when you get on the Zoom, or eventually if you're able to do a hybrid, go into breakouts, do fun games, simulations, whatever else. And I also emphasize the same thing that I told the parents. I think less is more right now. This is a year where we shouldn't try to do everything. We should try to focus on the few things that really, really, really matter, and do those reasonably well. And then make sure there's a lot of cushion for all of us to just regenerate and kind of deal with all of the stressors that are happening. And, teachers need that, students need that, and parents need that. So that's my best advice.
Thank you, Sal. Now it's time to turn our attention, if you would please, to some of the audience questions we've received either via email or chat. So let me start. Will somehow remain even after all schools are back to meeting in person?
Yeah, I think so. Even before COVID, like, to be very clear, I'm oftentimes the poster boy for like online learning or whatever, but I'm always very clear, for my own children, for myself, or for anyone else's children. If I had to pick between an amazing teacher and no technology, and the most amazing technology, I would pick the amazing teacher every time. Give them stick and sand. I guess stick and of the week. Now, ideally, we don't have to make that compromise. We could say, what are our pedagogical goals? And then what are the best resources we have to meet them? As I said, the teacher is the ultimate resource, but then every teacher also knows that in a class of 30 students, those 30 students have different gaps in their knowledge, the different levels of kind of a strong foundation. They're all ready to learn at different paces. But every teacher also knows, how can I cater to those 30 needs? I can't replicate myself 29 times. So they have to kind of go into a lockstep model. But now we have an opportunity, and this is where, we should never be using technology for technology's sake. But if we can use technology to meet the students where they are and to feel more the test 2 weeks later, to know that some of your kids have massive gaps and then you have to move on to the next concept. What if in real time you could know where maybe you realize that some things you can move faster through and other things you need to slow down. Foundational thing, let's get this right for you, and while everyone else works at their own time and pace. Or maybe find those 2 kids who really understand the concept and get them to tutor their peers, and give yourself some scale. So in my mind, pre-COVID, that was the type of thing that, when technology is used well, can unlock. It can actually make the human experience more human. And COVID has put a whole set of circumstances on us, many of them suboptimal. As I said, I would rather be in person with the teacher than have to do it all over video conference and all the screen time and all that. But it is making us ask some interesting questions about, how do we keep kids engaged? Once again, put them into breakout sessions, maybe, play with the duration, put some fun, Socratic dialogue in there, always be asking questions, pulling them out of the screen, cold calling. Well, some of those principles are going to make their way back into the physical environment, but also make sure the learning isn't bound by time or space. Keep going on Khan Academy. In theory, we should be able to do that post-COVID. I think, it's very painful in the short term that a whole generation of educators, there's a lot of educators who are already leaning into technology, but now all educators over the last several months have been thrown into the deep end of the pool with technology. And it's incredibly, difficult. People are swallowing water and choking and all this, but they're for the most part, they're not drowning. And as uncomfortable and as imperfect as it is right now, it's going to be very powerful when we go post-COVID, because I think a whole generation of educators are going to say, okay, what makes sense? They shouldn't use technology for technology's sake, but what makes sense for me? And if any of them had a fear of technology, I think that through COVID, I think you're going to see a lot more personalization. In fact, I think we're going to have more personalization, because post-COVID, to the earlier point, there's going to be even larger variance in students' engagement, that K-shaped recovery back to normalcy. It's going to be like a post-war or post-disaster type, post-earthquake or hurricane rebuilding process. And so I think we can't just get back to normal. Oh, you're in 7th grade. A natural disaster in our education system. Not the educator's fault. It's because of constraints that were beyond their control. How do we rebuild? And I think we have to have a focused effort there, probably next school year.
Question came in. Do you think the pandemic is pushing us into the future at a faster pace than normal?
I think it is. Like even outside of education, something y'all talk about it at the economic club, is the nature of work, and how much work has to be in person versus already announced that they've gone to in-person optional. I suspect Khan Academy might be going in that same direction as well, and I think people are asking similar questions in the education setting. And I think what the healthy part of this conversation is, people are unbundling. People are like, wow, school does a lot of things. It's the first time that I'm really hearing a lot of people say, wow, school does a lot more than I thought they do. Beyond making sure you cover the standards, they're a place for socialization, they're a place for assessment and credentialing. For a lot of places, they're a place for social services, they're a place for lunches, they're a place, the list goes on and on and on. They're even turning into telco providers in certain cases, where there's examples of them distributing devices and sending school buses with Wi-Fi out there so that people can access it. And so I think that unbundling, people are starting to think should persist. And people would not have thought this way had not COVID happened. So I think as we go back into normalcy, hopefully next year, people are going to say, well, we kind of liked that, we weren't bound. Like maybe there's a teacher at a school across town who's just completely nailed how to run a Socratic dialogue or the lesson or why don't we film them and let them be the kind of canonical video for our district? And for that unit, the other teachers are in support. And then for the next unit, it might be another teacher who is kind of giving that will save teachers time and effort. And then now to just a classroom or just a school. I don't know if that's a good idea, but it's an interesting idea, something to think about. The idea, there's a lot of parts of the country where kids don't have access to highly rigorous courses, or if they do, they're not at the level of rigor that you would expect. Some elements of distance learning. I would never want to go all distance learning for most. Connect to a course that your school might not offer. That could be pretty interesting. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of schools doing, for my 6-year-old, our school has started doing in person in a very safe way with masks and COVID and ventilation and all the rest. But half of the families are still staying at home. And so a lot of schools are doing models now because of COVID, where some kids are in the classroom, but the kids at home are able to participate. That feels like a very low hanging fruit that we should keep safer too. And so maybe the flu won't spread as much. But I think there's just a lot of really interesting things that we can keep doing. A lot of what we talk about Khan Academy, the personalization, the mastery-based learning, competency-based learning not being dependent on time and space, I think are going to only gain more momentum.
Two more real quick. Somebody just chatted. Colleen wants to nominate you for Secretary of Education. Are you in?
I think I would be better. I think I in the country would be better served by me being working closely with. I tend to, there's a lot of very important work there, but there's a lot of work of getting bills passed in Congress and budget allocations. My personality is much more suited to let's make more software content. Let's figure out how to reach more kids and drive efficacy studies and things like that. But I'm flattered that someone would suggest that.
Thanks, Al. All right, so I saved this question. I thought it was juicy. So last system, and you were given a blank slate to redesign the entire K through 12 curriculum in the US with no restraints, what would it look like and why? In 2 minutes, go.
In 2 minutes is the important part. I would make it a competency-based system. I would sit and say, what are the competencies that really matter? I think some of the ones that we already have, I would persist. Algebra, I think is you need in life. I think chemistry, physics, biology, solid reading comprehension, solid American history, civics, government, world history. I would then index even heavier on law. Your law student learns, frankly, by middle or high school. I would do accounting. I would probably try to put some CS in there. But the key is that it makes it competency based. So I would create a national way that folks can prove what they know in any of these areas, and it's nationally or internationally recognized. And then, for things like algebra or algebra 2, if you show mastery in it and you're recognized, that also gives you college credit, so that you don't have to go to college and then say, oh, do you get college algebra or not? Or you have to take remediation. A lot of these courses, chemistry, physics, biology, statistics would be another one I add because it's useful in every domain. I'm talking super fast because I have a lot to add here. I would make you get credit for those things. Unbundle the high school or the college diplomas so that you make it clear to employers, like, you don't need a big college diploma. That's fine. Of that, and then make that very clear to students and educators. Okay, if students are able to show mastery in A, B, and C, these types of employers are willing to hire them. If they show mastery in D, E, and to a college diploma. And so something like that would really, streamline the process, and then unlock a lot of creativity. It makes the competency fixed, and what the variable is the how and when and how long. versus the system we have today where the ability is in the competency.
Sal, you're an incredible thought leader. Thanks so much for your. We so appreciate your time today. Keep up the great work. We can do live events again today. So thanks again so much for being with us, Sal.
Thanks for having me. Not to our future.
Have a great day, Sal. Thank you for being with us. If you're staying for the virtual networking, just give us. And so goodbye to those of you